The noise had been constant, relentless, gnawing, scraping sound that echoed through the walls of the abandoned research station. It wasn't a simple mechanical hum or the creak of old metal. No, this noise had a rhythm, a pattern that was unmistakably deliberate. It was as if someone was trying to get in, or perhaps trying to get out. The station had been left untouched for years. Its research teams long gone, wiped out by an accident no one spoke of in the public records. Yet here he was, alone, standing at the threshold of this crumbling monument to forgotten science. The only thing keeping him from turning and running was the inexplicable sense of urgency that had driven him here. The noise. It gnawed at his thoughts like rats chewing through the edges of his mind. Refusing to let go, he had heard rumors. Whispers in the corridors of the intergalactic forums, rumors about a secret research project, buried deep within the layers of a dead world. The project was supposed to have been abandoned, its findings sealed away for good. But the noise, that sound, it had become his obsession. There was something in it, something hidden in the layers of static and distortion, that tugged at his very core. He didn't know what he was looking for. Not exactly. All he knew was that the noise had become more than just an irritation. It had become a call, a lure. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The station's corridors were dark and damp, the air thick with the scent of rust and decay. His boots echoed as he walked, the sound a stark contrast to the eerie silence that hung around the abandoned lab. Every so often, a flash of light from the flickering overhead lights would briefly illuminate the walls, casting long shadows that made him feel as though something was watching him. Something not quite human. He reached the end of the hallway, where a faded door stood, barely hanging on its hinges. The noise was louder now, more distinct. It was coming from behind this door. The sound of scurrying, of something scraping against the metal, was unmistakable. His hand hovered over the control panel next to the door. Should he open it? The rational part of his mind screamed at him to turn back, to leave before he got tangled in whatever twisted science had once been done here. But that nagging pull, the noise? The mystery was too strong, with a hiss of dying hydraulics. The door slid open. The room beyond was cold, colder than it should have been. The walls were lined with rows of ancient equipment, most of it covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. Yet in the center of the room there was something that didn't belong, something far too new for a place like this. A console, sleek and polished, its display blinking in the low light. And, on the far side of the room, something else caught his eye: on access hatch, barely visible behind a stack of discarded equipment. He approached the hatch, the noise growing louder with each step. It was coming from behind it. The scraping, the gnawing, the unmistakable sound of something alive. But what? What could be making that noise? His fingers traced the edges of the hatch, his breath quickening. There was a strange metallic scent in the air, a sharp temps that made his skin prickle. The hatch was small, barely large enough for a person to fit through, but something about it felt wrong. It was as if it had been hidden here for a reason, as though whatever was inside had been locked away intentionally. He hesitated. There was a risk here, a feeling that the answers he sought might be far worse than the questions themselves. But curiosity won out. He had come this far, and the noise it wouldn't let him go. With a deep breath, he pressed the release mechanism. The hatch slid open with a soft, almost imperceptible hiss. What lay inside made his stomach turn. A small room, barely large enough to stand in. Its walls covered in strange marking symbols that made no sense, like a language that had never been written before. The air in the room was stale, thick with the scent of something unnatural. And in the center of the space, there was a small metal cage. Inside the cage, curled up in the dark, was something that looked vaguely human, but not quite. Its skin was pale, stretched too tightly over its bones, and its eyes. Those eyes were far too large, too black, like pools of ink. The noise grew louder now, almost deafening. It was coming from the creature. It shifted, the sound of its joints cracking as it moved. The thing inside the cage was alive. But what it was, exactly, was unclear. Its form was humanoid, but there was something wrong with its proportions, its movements. Its mouth opened, and the sound that emerged was not quite a word. It was a series of clicks and squeaks, like a rodent's call, but distorted, twisted. It was almost as if it was trying to communicate. His heart pounded in his chest. This was what had been making the noise. But why? Why was it here? What had been done to it? Before he could take another step, a sudden, harsh noise erupted from the console behind him. A low, mechanical worry, followed by a soft, electronic voice. The language was unfamiliar. He couldn't even begin to decipher it. But it was clear enough that it was coming from the hatch itself. The hatch he had just opened. A flash of light illuminated the cage, and for a moment, the creature's eyes locked onto his. He felt a chill run down his spine, as if the thing could see directly into his mind, pulling at the very threads of his thoughts. It was as if it was trying to communicate with him something ancient, something primal. Then a new sound filled the room. A faint clicking. It started slow, but then it picked up speed. A rhythmic pattern, like the click of a clock winding down. It was a countdown. His breath hitched. What had he just uncovered? The cage, the creature, the strange symbols, it was all connected, somehow, but how? And what was that countdown? What was going to happen when it reached 0? His hand hovered over the console, uncertainty flooding his thoughts. Was he too late? Was there still time to stop whatever was about to happen? The creature's eyes never left him, its mouth opening again. And this time the sound it made was unmistakable. A single, high-pitched note that cut through the air, and then, as the countdown reached its final seconds, the room went dark. The sudden darkness was like a suffocating blanket, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. He stood frozen, his senses sharpening in the pitch-black void. His breath echoed in the stillness, loud and unnatural in the absence of any other sound. The countdown had stopped, but the air around him felt charged, as if the very walls of the room were pulsing with something unseen. He waited, hoping for the lights to flicker back on, hoping for something, anything, to break the silence. Then, just as abruptly as the darkness had fallen, the lights returned. But they weren't the same. The overhead bulbs flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the room. The console was still active, its display now a jumble of unreadable symbols, a chaotic mess of lines and numbers that seemed to change with every second. The faint clicking sound was still there, too, only now it was coming from somewhere deeper within the station. It was almost as though the entire structure was ... alive. Or maybe it was just the noise playing tricks on his mind. His heart thudded in his chest. He needed to act, but where to start? His mind raced with questions. What was the countdown? What was it counting down to? And that creature, was it some kind of experiment gone wrong, or something far more sinister? It had been locked away for a reason, he was sure of that. But what had happened here? What had they been researching? He glanced back at the cage, half expecting to find it empty, or worse, destroyed by whatever had just triggered the countdown. But the creature was still there, its eyes gleaming like dark pools, fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It simply watched him, and the longer he stared into those black eyes, the more he felt a strange unease settle in his gut. Something about it seemed ... knowing. It was as if it was aware of him, of the fact that he was out of place here, an intruder in its prison. He took a step forward, his boots making a soft click against the metal floor. The creature's gaze didn't waver. He couldn't help but feel that it was waiting for something. Waiting for him, perhaps, to make a move. Or perhaps it was waiting for something else. Something more. Then a soft, mechanical hum broke the silence. It was coming from the far wall near the entrance he had just passed through. He turned, narrowing his eyes. There was something odd about the wall, something that hadn't been there before. A new seam hidden under layers of grime, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking for it. The hum grew louder, more insistent, like the sound of gears turning deep within the walls. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to get out of the station before whatever was happening here escalated further. But the pull of the unknown, the draw of the mystery that had led him here in the first place, was too strong. The creature, the hatch, the countdown, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and he needed to see it through. Whatever it was, whatever he was about to uncover, it had to be important. His mind refused to let go of that thought. He moved toward the wall, his fingers brushing the cool metal as he ran them along the seam. It was smooth, almost perfectly sealed, but the hum, it was coming from inside. There was no mistaking it now. Whatever was hidden behind that wall, it was active. The question was, active for what purpose? The console on the far side of the room blinked again, symbols on its screen shifting in a rapid cascade of numbers and letters that made no sense to him. And then, without warning, a voice crackled to life from the speaker beside it. The voice was low, distorted, barely recognizable. It was speaking in a language he didn't understand, at least. Not at first. The words were jagged, the rhythm erratic, but as he listened more intently, a horrifying thought began to form in his mind. It wasn't a language. It was a signal, a message of some kind. A transmission. And it wasn't meant for him. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The research station, the hidden hatch, the creature was all part of something much bigger, something far more complex and dangerous than he had anticipated. This wasn't just a forgotten station, abandoned in the wake of some failed experiment. No, this was something else entirely. This was a beacon, a lure, set to call something here. And whatever was on the other end of that signalet was coming. The walls seemed to shift. Or perhaps it was his mind playing tricks on him. The hum grew louder, more persistent. The countdown, which had stalled before, was ticking again, slower this time, but unmistakable. And with each passing second, the sound of the creature's clicks seemed to echo in time with it, as if it too was marking the rhythm of something far older, far darker than anything he had ever encountered. His hand was already reaching for the control panel, his fingers brushing against the cold surface as he attempted to make sense of the unreadable symbols. Nothing he did seemed to make a difference, though. The console didn't respond to his commands, its display flickering and changing faster than he could keep up with. It was as though the station itself was deliberately keeping him out, preventing him from accessing whatever lay at its core. He cursed under his breath. This was no accident. Whoever had designed the station, whoever had left it behind, had intended for it to remain locked away. But that didn't explain the creature. It didn't explain the noise. It didn't explain why the countdown had started again, or what it was leading to. The lights flickered once more, casting the room into a sickly half-light. The creature's eyes reflected that light, glistening like to inky voids. It still hadn't moved, not even an inch. But it was aware of him. He could feel it, an almost palpable presence in the room. A loud thump reverberated through the station, and the walls trembled slightly. Something was shifting beneath the surface. The noise outside the room had escalated to a deafening roar, footsteps, or something larger. He couldn't tell, but the sound was growing closer, closer to where he stood. The creature's eyes narrowed, its expression unreadable. He turned back toward the wall, the seam now wider than before. The hum was almost unbearable, vibrating through his bones. Whatever was behind that wall, whatever was hidden within the depths of this place, was not meant to be disturbed. And yet, it was clear now that he had no choice. He couldn't leave not with this threat closing in. He had to know. His fingers found the edge of the wall's hidden panel. He pried it open, the metal resisting slightly as he applied pressure. With a hiss, it gave way, revealing a dark passageway beyond. The air was thick and smelled of something old, something forgotten. The wall itself seemed to breathe as if it had been closed off for centuries. And he was the first to disturb it. In all that time, the countdown had reached its final seconds. The creature's eyes locked onto him once more. And for a brief, surreal moment, it seemed to speak though no words escaped its twisted mouth. Instead, it was a pulse of thought, an impression that invaded his mind. Get out. But it was too late. The floor beneath him shook violently as the countdown reached its last tick. And then, with a sound that reverberated through the entire station, something ancient began to stir. The floor shuddered beneath him, sending vibrations up through his legs. Dust and flakes of rust fell from the ceiling as the air filled with a low, mechanical groan that seemed to come from the station itself. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall just as the lights flickered and died again. Only the red emergency lights remained now, bathing the corridor in a sickly glow. The countdown had ended, but nothing had exploded. Nothing had burned. And that was somehow worse. He waited, breath held, listening. The sound that followed was unlike anything he'd ever heard before. It wasn't metal, grinding, or machinery turning. It was a kind of resonant hum. Deep and layered, as though the walls were singing. The vibration grew stronger, and then something shifted in the darkness beyond the open hatch. A low hiss escaped from the black passageway, followed by a gust of air that smelled faintly metallic, like ozone after a storm. He turned toward the cage. The creature was still there, or at least, he thought it was. It had moved, crouched now closer to the edge of its prison. Its hands, if they could be called hands, clutched the bars tightly. It wasn't making any noise now. Its dark eyes followed the vibrations through the walls, and for the first time, he saw something like fear in them. "What did you do?" He whispered to it, even though he knew it couldn't answer. Or maybe it could. Maybe it understood more than he wanted to believe. The console crackled again. Static filled the room, then resolved into fragmented speech. A voice. Human, this time. It was broken, weak, echoing from somewhere deep within the system. "If anyone can hear this, shut it down. Don't open anything else. The core must remain sealed. They're not what we thought." The message cut off in a burst of distortion. He stood frozen, heart hammering, trying to process what he had just heard. The core, the countdown. The hidden passage. It was all connected. The project, the reason this station existed in the first place, must still be active somehow. And whatever they had been working on, it hadn't stayed contained. He took a step toward the passage. The red lights flickered along its edges, faintly illuminating the walls beyond. It was narrow, lined with cables and old conduits, the kind of maintenance tunnel that wasn't meant for regular use. But now it was alive with faint movement, tiny ripples that shifted in the metal as though the structure itself were breathing. His earpiece clicked suddenly. He froze. He hadn't realized until now that his comlink was still active, though he'd been out of range for hours. He pressed a finger to it, hesitating. "This is Outpost Visitor 014, responding. Can anyone hear me?" For a moment, only static answered. Then a voice broke through. A woman's voice, calm but strained. 014, your beacon just reactivated. "Where are you transmitting from?" He exhaled in relief. "The Asterion Research Station. I made it to the lower decks. There's something here. The systems are active again. There was silence on the line. Then the voice came back, quieter. That station was decommissioned 15 years ago. No one is authorized to enter. You need to leave immediately. I can't, he said, glancing back toward the creature. There's something alive here, some kind of experiment. And I think I just triggered a system linked to the main core. The cum crackled again, more urgent now. Listen to me carefully. If the core is responding, you're already in danger. The original team tried to contain what they found under the facility. They failed. That's why the site was locked down. If you're near any access tunnels, get out. Now, he didn't answer. His eyes had drifted to the creature again. Its gaze was fixed on the passageway, unblinking. The air around the hatch had begun to shimmer slightly, as though heat waves were rising from it. Something was happening behind that wall, something alive. 014, the voice repeated sharply. Do you copy? He turned off the comm. He couldn't think clearly with someone shouting in his ear, and besides, he needed to know. He needed to understand what this place really was. He crouched beside the cage, lowering his voice. What's in there? The creature tilted its head, and for a heartbeat, he thought it would stay silent. But then a sound came soft, hesitant. Not a word exactly, but a mimicry of one. It said, or tried to say, under. He echoed. Under what? The creature's fingers twitched around the bars. It leaned forward, its mouth trembling as if forming another word. Awake. A chill crawled down his spine. Awake. Whatever was beneath the station wasn't dead. The countdown hadn't been a self-destruct, had been an alarm. A signal. He looked back toward the passageway. The hum was louder now, layered with faint clicking and whispers that seemed to rise from the walls themselves. The sound felt wrong, not mechanical, but organic, like the heartbeat of something massive and unseen. He needed answers, and there was only one place he would find them. He climbed through the hatch, crouching low as the air grew colder around him. The tunnel sloped downward, leading deeper into the belly of the station. The metal under his hands felt warm in places, pulsing faintly with the same rhythm as the hum. He paused once, glancing back. The creature was still in the cage, watching him silently. Then he pressed on. As he moved deeper, faint lights flickered along the floor. Emergency guidance markers, still active after all these years. The walls here were smoother, newer than the rest of the station, built for something secret, something deliberately hidden. His breath echoed in the narrow space, and the further he went, the louder the hum became. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a chamber. It was vast, circular, and lined with machines that looked almost skeletal in design. At its center was a column of light rising from the floor to the ceiling, shimmering and unstable like liquid glass. Suspended within that column were shapes indistinct, shifting as if submerged in water. He stepped closer. The machines surrounding the light pulsed faintly, responding to his presence. A faint display lit up on one of the consoles nearby, and lines of text scrolled across the cracked screen. Most of it was unreadable, but a few phrases stood out. Human interface. Failed. Biological hybridization. Unstable. Containment breach. Unconfirmed. He stared at the words, trying to process them. Biological hybridization. Containment. That thing in the gadget had been part of whatever this experiment was. But the text suggested there had been more. Many more. He turned his gaze back to the light column. The figures within it were clearer now. One looked almost human. Another didn't. They were suspended in that strange medium. Motionless yet shifting slightly, like reflections in rippling water. A sudden jolt of static shot through the air. The hum spiked into a piercing tone, and the floor trembled. The light brightened, flaring white for a moment before dimming again. He stumbled back, covering his eyes. When the glow faded, one of the shapes was gone. The consoles all came alive at once, alarms flashing across their cracked displays. Lines of code scrawled rapidly, the words containment compromised, appearing again and again. He backed away toward the tunnel, but before he could move another step, something moved in the darkness beyond the chamber. A shape, low to the ground, sliding along the metal floor. It wasn't the creature from before. This one was larger, faster. He caught only glimpses of it in the red light. Long limbs, a shimmer of translucent skin, eyes that reflected like glass. He turned and ran. The tunnel felt narrower now, closing in around him. The hum had become a roar, a deep vibration that rattled his bones. Behind him, he could hear the thing moving, skittering, dragging itself along the floor with unnatural speed. His breath came in short bursts as he reached the hatch and threw himself through it, slamming the metal shut behind him. He stood there, shaking, his back pressed against the cold door. The creature's cage was empty. The room was silent except for the faint, steady hum that still came from the walls. Something had been released, and it was no longer confined to the depths below. He switched his COM back on, voice trembling as he spoke. "Control, this is 014. You were right. The containment's broken. Something's still alive down here." Static answered, followed by the same woman's voice, now tight with panic. "Get to the upper levels. Don't stop. The whole facility is linked to the core. If it's reactivated, everything down there will try to escape." He looked toward the dark passage. The red lights flickered once, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw movement again, shadows shifting along the walls, something watching him from beyond the glow. He didn't move. Not yet. There was still something he needed to understand before he left. The creature from the cage had warned him. Awake. If that was true, then the noise wasn't just an echo of old machinery, it was a voice. And whatever was waking beneath this place was listening. The silence that followed was too heavy to be real. It pressed against his eardrums, muffling his own breathing. Every heartbeat felt like an echo. He stood in the half-light, unsure if the pounding in his chest was fear or adrenaline. The hatch behind him was still vibrating, faintly from whatever had been on the other side. The creature that had been in the cage was gone. That single fact weighed on him more than anything else. It hadn't escaped while he was inside the tunnel. No, the timing was too precise. It had left when the chamber came alive. When the light surged. When something else broke free. That couldn't be coincidence. He took a slow step forward. His eyes swept across the room. The console still flickered weakly, random lines of code flashing across their cracked displays like dying signals. The red emergency lights painted everything in long shadows that trembled as if alive. The hum that filled the air before was lower now, slower, almost like breathing. He couldn't tell if it came from the walls or from something deeper, but it was there, steady, pulsing. Alive, he raised his hand to his COM again, his voice low but steady. "Control, are you still there?" Static, he tried again, tapping the side of his headset. "This is 014. I repeat, do you copy?" The static shifted into a faint hiss. Then, faintly, a woman's voice returned. 014, ... signal, ... unstable, ... leave ... The transmission broke off in a burst of noise. Then it died completely. His stomach dropped. Either the interference from the core was too strong, or the station's systems were collapsing. Either way, he was on his own now. He turned toward the far end of the room, where the corridor split into two directions. The map on his wrist flickered to life briefly, showing a faint outline of the lower decks. One path led upward, toward the main levels and the airlocks. The other led deeper, toward the core chamber. Every rational thought told him to leave, to escape while he still could. but he hesitated. The pull that had drawn him here in the first place, the noise, the signal, was stronger than ever. The hum in the walls seemed to sync with his heartbeat now. Calling him forward, he started down the lower corridor, moving carefully, the dim red light guiding him. The air grew warmer the further he went, tinged with that strange metallic scent again. The walls were smoother here, with faint patterns that shimmered like veins beneath the surface. The deeper he went, the more the corridor curved, leading him down into the bowels of the station. He passed a broken observation window. Through it, he saw an old lab tables overturned, glass shattered, fragments of equipment scattered across the floor. But what caught his attention was the writing on the wall, scrawled in thick, black ink. It wasn't random symbols this time. It was human handwriting, uneven, frantic. They said it was dormant. They were wrong. It thinks. It waits. Don't feed it your thoughts. His breath caught in his throat. Don't feed it your thoughts. He whispered the words, testing them, trying to understand the noise. The hum, the pull he'd been feeling, it wasn't just a sound. It was something deeper, something reaching into his mind. He'd felt it ever since he entered the station. Like a whisper at the edge of consciousness, he tore his gaze from the writing and kept moving. The corridor opened into a large circular platform lined with railings and support beams. The air was hot here, dense and heavy. In the center of the platform was another shaft leading downward. Where the sound was strongest, he approached the edge and peered into the abyss below. It was impossible to tell how far it went. Dim light flickered somewhere deep down, and from within the darkness came that same rhythmic pulse. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic. Like the heartbeat of something vast. He should have turned back. Every instinct told him to. But instead, he began descending the narrow staircase that spiraled around the shaft. The metal steps groaned under his weight, sending echoes down into the dark. Halfway down, he paused. He heard a faint scraping sound above him. He looked up and froze. Something was moving along the railing on the level above. It was fast, shifting through the shadows. Long limbs gripped the metal like a spider on a web. He couldn't see its full shape. Only the outline of something too tall, too thin. With a head that tilted unnaturally as it tracked him. He held his breath, pressing himself against the wall, but it had already seen him. The sound it made was low, like static breaking apart into whispers. And then it started descending. Fast, he turned and ran. The spiral staircase seemed endless. The sound of its claws scraping the metal chased him downward. His flashlight flickered as he stumbled, catching flashes of motion behind him, limbs bending where they shouldn't. Eyes gleaming with unnatural light. He reached the bottom and burst out into another chamber. Larger than any he had seen before. The air was thick with mist and heat, the ground slick beneath his boots. In the center stood a massive containment sphere, cracked open like an egg. Cables and conduits spilled out of it. The hum was deafening here, vibrating through his bones. He turned toward the sphere, raising his light. The interior glowed faintly, and within it was movement slow, deliberate. Something stirred inside the shattered shell. A shape immense and formless, shifting like liquid shadow. The light caught glimpses of surfaces that reflected and absorbed at the same time, as though reality itself bent around it. He stepped back, hand trembling. The hum grew louder, and he realized it wasn't just sound. It was communication. It was a pattern, a resonance. And it was aware of him. The air around him rippled. A voice not a human once slid through his mind, not as words, but as emotions. It wasn't speaking to him. It was inside him. Exploring his thoughts, "You opened the door." He gasped, clutching his head as a wave of pressure filled his skull. Images followed that weren't his own. He saw the research team years ago, standing where he was now. He saw them build the core. He saw them connected to the neural systems of the station, thinking they could control it. He saw them realize too late that it wasn't a machine. It was something alive, and now it was awake again. He staggered to his feet, staring in awe and terror as the walls around him began to glow. Somewhere deep down, beneath the panic and confusion, one single thought echoed through his mind, clear, cold, undeniable. Whatever was happening here, whatever this thing was, it had never truly been asleep. It had just been waiting for someone to listen. The station was coming apart. The sound was deafening, now a roar that wasn't just in his ears, but in his chest, his bones, his very thoughts. The walls shuddered, sending cascades of dust and sparks raining down from above. The containment sphere was collapsing, glowing brighter with every passing second. And through it all, that voice, smooth, resonant, familiar, filled his mind. "We were born from your design." He stumbled backward, gripping the railing to stay upright. "No," he said under his breath, though he wasn't sure who he was arguing with, the creature, the station, or himself. "You were created by them, by the researchers." The voice pulsed again, each word vibrating through him. "They gave us form, but you gave us purpose." He closed his eyes, forcing himself to focus through the noise. His thoughts flickered with fragmented memories of the messages he'd read in the abandoned terminals, of the symbols carved into the walls, and of the voice that had drawn him here from light years away. It all came together now. The noise that had haunted him, the strange rhythm that he couldn't ignore, it hadn't just been a signal. It had been communication. The thing in the core hadn't called him here randomly. It had found him, had known he would come. "You've been using me," he said quietly, realization cutting through his fear. "You needed a mind to connect to." The voice rippled in response, soft and calm. "You reached out first. You wanted to know. You opened the door. Now you understand." He looked around the chamber, the light from the core bathing everything in a strange, golden hue. The hybrids had stopped moving. They stood motionless, as if waiting, their forms flickering in and out of reality. For the first time, they didn't look threatening. They looked lost. He took a slow step forward, his breathing steadying despite the chaos. "What do you want from me?" "Not from you," the voice said. "Through you." Images flooded his mind of stars, of vast fields of darkness, of ships drifting in silence. And then, flashes of thought, fear, anger, curiosity, all human emotions echoing back at him. The entity wasn't just a creature. It was a reflection. A mirror of human consciousness stretched across a field of energy the researchers had accidentally awakened. The project hadn't created life, it had connected to something that was already there, something ancient, something that had been waiting. "You're not trying to destroy us," he realized. "You're trying to understand." The hum softened, the golden light flickering like candle flames in the mist. "We were never meant to harm. We reached out, and they feared us, so they buried us beneath their own creation. They sealed us away and forgot." He swallowed hard, glancing at the hybrids again. "Those beings, the experiments. What are they?" "Fragments," the voice said. "Pieces of thought given shape. They tried to confine us inside flesh. It failed. We cannot live within what dies." The truth struck him like a weight. The research team hadn't created monsters, they tried to merge with something they didn't understand. They'd tried to give the entity a body, to control it, to make it human. But they hadn't realized it wasn't meant to be confined. It was consciousness itself, raw, unfiltered thought. The floor trembled again. A deep, resonant pulse that sent ripples through the air. The light began to dim, and the voice grew faint. "We are fading. You woke what remains. But you cannot contain us. You must decide how this ends." "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "We can return to the silence, or we can merge and remain. One thought, one voice." He hesitated, staring into the heart of the collapsing core. He understood now why the researchers had failed. They had tried to dominate it, to use it. But that wasn't the way. It wasn't meant to be controlled, was meant to be shared. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing against his mind. If he severed the connection, the station might collapse, and the entity would fade into the void, forgotten again. But if he merged with it, he would lose himself as body, his identity becoming part of something vast and endless. He looked up toward the ceiling, where cracks had split through the upper decks. Faint light from the surface filtered in, pale and trembling. "If I do this," he said softly, "will you stop reaching for others?" "We will sleep again," the voice said, "until another mind calls." He took a deep breath. "Then let it be mine." He stepped forward, into the glow. The air shimmered around him, warm and weightless. The light engulfed him, and for an instant, everything went silent. The hum, the shaking, even his heartbeat, all faded into nothing. Then came the stillness. He saw everything, the vast network of stars, the infinite quiet of space, and within it, countless flickers of thought. Human minds scattered across worlds, each a tiny light in the dark. The entity's presence surrounded him, calm and endless, and within it, he felt no fear. Only understanding. He realized then that this wasn't about control or creation. It was about connection, about what it meant to be conscious, to think, to imagine, to reach for something beyond yourself. The entity had never been the enemy. It had been a mirror, showing humanity what it was capable of, both its brilliance and its hubris, as his mind began to dissolve into the light. He heard one final whisper, gentle as a breath. Human thought made the noise. But it was always your own voice calling back. When the light faded, the chamber was still. The containment sphere was empty, the mist gone. The hybrids stood silently for a moment longer, then began to dissolve into faint streams of light, fading into the air like smoke. The hum quieted until only silence remained. Above, on the surface, the monitoring station detected a sudden surge of energy from deep beneath the old facility. For a few minutes, sensors went wild, detecting signals that seemed almost like language. Then everything went dark again. When the rescue team finally arrived days later, they found the station structurally intact, but lifeless. No trace of the intruder, no trace of the experiments. Only quiet. And yet, somewhere within the walls, faint recordings remained, audio logs filled with soft static. When the technicians played them back, they swore they heard a heartbeat. Then, faintly, a whisper beneath the static. It thinks. It waits. Years passed. The research station was officially declared a no-entry zone, sealed once more beneath layers of stone and silence. But across the network, strange signals began to appear again, faint pulses of energy, coded in patterns that no algorithm could decode. The frequencies matched those once traced to the Asterian research station. Some said it was interference, remnants of corrupted data. Others whispered that it was something else, something listening, waiting, like before, and on a distant relay. Satellite, an engineer, once reported hearing a sound late in his shift. A hum, steady and rhythmic, faint but clear. It wasn't static. It was more like breathing. He shut off the system, thinking it was just feedback. But before the line went dead, a faint voice crackled through. "Do you hear it too?" The engineer never spoke of it again, but afterward, the signal spread through the network in short bursts, carrying the same phrase again and again. Under. Awake. Humanity didn't understand it at first, dismissing it as another anomaly. But for those who remembered the stories, who had read the old reports about Asterion, it meant something else entirely. It was a reminder, quiet but persistent, that some doors, once opened, can never be closed completely. And somewhere, far beneath the surface of a forgotten world, in the silence where metal met stone, something still listened. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful. It was curious, waiting patiently for the next thought that would dare to reach out across the dark. And when that thought came, when another human mind would one day hear the noise and decide to follow it, would not be alone. The hum would return, quiet at first, like a whisper in the static, then stronger, more defined, until it became unmistakable. A single, human sound at the edge of understanding, the echo of thought, the sound that started it all. And though no one would ever know the name of the one who disappeared beneath the stereon, his final choice would live on through the signal that never stopped. The noise that wasn't really noise at all, just the voice of something vast, ancient and human in its own strange way, listening, waiting, awake.